Well, thanks, Walt. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. This is my second event of the day. I'm coming to you from an event in Wisconsin earlier today. That's what my mysterious lapel pin means. The X is for 10th Amendment. It was a 10th Amendment Center event. I hear you guys saw the Nullification movie, so I was up promoting that today. Super fun. A couple things before I get started here. Let's see, what have I got? Oh, yeah, okay, as long as I was talking about the 10th Amendment thing. So the 10th Amendment Center, I just say, first of all, is an example of how one person can really change things. You know, like we talk about this a lot. One person can change the world. You say, come on. That's a lot of corny crap. That's not true. But it is true. Because Michael Bolden was a guy who was sitting in his Los Angeles apartment in 2006 during George W. Bush's second term. No conservative wants to hear about the 10th Amendment under George W. Bush, right? George W. Bush is the great conservative we've all been waiting for, right? Why would you criticize him? What are you, some kind of pinko commie? But Michael Bolden started this thing at a time when it was as unpopular as could be, and he started it with nothing. He started it with $0, no big donor, no media support, no academic support, nothing. And a few weeks ago, he just hit 100,000 likes on Facebook. Wow, right? One guy. So on Monday, I start my new Monday through Friday podcast at tomwoodsradio.com. And my first guest, some people might say, oh, you're going to have Ron Paul, you're going to have Judge Napolitano, you're going to have Peter Schiff, maybe. And I thought, you know, that's all too obvious. I'm going to throw people a curveball. For my first guest, I have Michael Bolden, because I want to know how in the world he did this. There you go. So Monday's guest is Michael Bolden. Tuesday's guest is Ben Swan. And Wednesday's guest, now let's see how old the crowd is here. Wednesday's guest is Ian Anderson of Jethro Tull. Who knows who that is? Yeah! How did I swing that one? I have no idea. Boy, did I scam him into coming onto my show. So anyway, that's tomwoodsradio.com. It's Monday through Friday, 11 a.m. Central Time. Notice I only give it in Central Time. The world revolves around Central Time. I would also like to welcome my 10-year-old daughter, Regina, is with me here for the weekend. And everybody has been wonderful to her. I mean, everybody's treated her like a queen, even though we don't believe in that stuff. Still, you've been extremely generous to her. We appreciate that. And I will note that we are actually expecting child number 5. So we are going to win the battle of ideas through sheer numbers. Yeah, I know. Well, but right now we have 4 children. They're all girls. So I actually saw Ron Paul not long ago, told him the news, and I said, you think the likelihood is pretty good that it's going to be another girl? And he said, well, you don't really have to be a scientist to answer that question. So, all right, fair enough. All right, so let's jump in here. I'm going to say, just so that people know, I've got a little table out there with a few books, but one of the books that's on the table is called We Who Dared to Say No to War. And I point this out to you because I've got about maybe a dozen of them. And this book is only 10 smackers. And I want to point out to you the reason it's 10 smackers, just so that you're not going to complain to me later that I ripped you off, is that on this printing there was a mistake. All the table of contents, it lists every item as starting on page 0. So if you can deal with that, it's a mere 10 smackers. Now, on the other hand, as somebody pointed out to me, if I were a better marketer, the way I should have marketed this is said, okay, you get a book plus a free puzzle, right? But not smart enough marketing this. I did this, by the way, with a guy on the left that I knew when I was living on Long Island. We got to know each other, and I didn't agree with him on anything except on war. And so we thought, well, you know, we're anti-mass murder. That's the basis of a friendship. So what we did was we just took all the most interesting writings we could find from all the major American wars, anti-war writings. Our criteria were that you couldn't be, if you're going to be included in this book, You couldn't be a fascist or a commie. But otherwise, we were very generous and ecumenical. So it goes from the War of 1812 and all the people, contemporary critics of all these different wars up to today. So it's kind of an interesting little book. But that's so you know, don't you come crying to me later. Woods ripped me off with a broken table of contents. Now I just told you. Anyway, I'd like to say a big thank you to the Libertarian Party of Illinois. I'm quite delighted to be here and to speak to people who have been in the trenches for I don't know how long, but I'm sure for many of you it's a very long time. Okay, good, right, yay. Now, one of the fun things you must have to deal with would be the libertarians who tell you that voting is immoral and participating in the political process is immoral. So we don't care about your elections and we don't care about your races. We don't care. We're not going to pay any attention. We're not going to vote for you. We're not going to help you. And there are a lot of people who hold that view. Now, I suppose there are a lot of people in my circles who hold that view. I'm sure that in the broad spectrum of things, we're dealing with a tiny minority. But all the same, there are a lot of people who seem in libertarian circles to hold this view. And I just don't accept that. Now, I realize I'm preaching to the choir here, but I do want to begin by talking about this a little bit. Because it seems to me that a very good counterexample that several people have raised is, suppose you've been confined in a slave labor camp, and one day the government announces that, all right, we're going to have a vote. Every prisoner in the slave labor camp gets a vote, and if a majority of you votes to be freed from the slave labor camp, we'll free you. Now, is your voting skeptic going to say, well, in that situation, on principle, I just wouldn't vote. I'm going to stay here in the prison camp. I mean, if that person would rather stay in a prison camp than vote, then I say, wipe the dust off your feet, move to another town, and move on, right? Don't bother with this person. But the point is that when they claim that, well, by voting you are legitimizing the system, right? No, you're not. If I'm not legitimizing the slave labor camp by saying, well, look, I've been given an opportunity to improve my material condition, I think I'll take it. That's all I'm doing. So I don't go for this. So I think you guys are on the right track. Let me get some water. Would somebody mind pouring me some water? I didn't think to get a glass of water. I'm only 3 minutes into the remarks, and I'm already parched and begging for mercy here. So, and the fact is, like it or not, most people don't attend seminars on political philosophy. Thank you very much. Most people get their views on politics by reading the newspaper during election cycles. That's where they don't sit around thinking, what would be the best political philosophy? Would it be one that minimizes coercion or one that maximizes equality? Nobody thinks about this. I mean, most people would rather, frankly, go to the mall or watch football, whatever. Most people don't think about this stuff. They only think about it when it's in their faces. And now, of course, it's in their faces constantly because it's 2013. We're already doing polls for the presidential race in 2016. Are we to be spared nothing? We don't even get a breather from this? So it seems to me that if we're not out there, if we're not involved in this, then our political philosophy does not get a hearing. Now, I know in theory, in some ideal Platonic universe, everyone would sit down and evaluate each political philosophy on its merits. But we don't live in a world like that. We're never going to live in a world like that. So that's one of the reasons that it's so important for us to be out there. But the key question is, once we're there, what should we do? What should we be aiming to do? We want to be successful, but it depends. Sorry to sound like Bill Clinton here, but it depends on what you mean by success, right? I mean, success can mean a lot of different things. Now, obviously, you'd like to win, right? There's nothing against winning. We're not philosophically opposed to winning. But winning at what cost? There wouldn't be much point in winning if by the time you get in, you have morphed into John McCain, right? What was the point? You wasted your time, you were away from your family. Like, what was the point? So we have to ask what we would consider success. And we also have to remember how gigantic our task is. Because when we remember how gigantic the task is, it puts into perspective how we should think about what constitutes success. The things we're saying on a lot of issues run counter, 100% counter, to what most of our fellow Americans learned in school. Now, it's true that we have individual issues on which we can have a broad appeal across ideological categories and the ideological divide in the country. That's true. But taken as a single whole, we are saying things that are the opposite of what kids were taught, right? I mean, you all know what kids are taught. That's why we're trying to yank the kids out of the system. We all know what they're being taught there. They're being taught that the government, of course, is just there. These are public servants who are looking out for your well-being. And that's why they're there. They're sacrificing their time and their resources, not for themselves, you understand. These people have no egos. They have no interests of their own. They are disembodied spirits in which nothing but justice is a consideration. Now, this is I'm not like Peter Schiff. I fill in for Schiff on his radio program once in a while. But one area where he is vastly superior to me is in coming up with analogies. Like, Schiff has the most brilliant analogies. I mean, and they just come to him on the fly. Like, he was talking about stress tests for banks. And he was saying, yeah, these stress tests are like running a gerbil over the Brooklyn Bridge. Like, wow, that's a good analogy. So when I come up with an analogy, like once every 8.5 years, I cling to this thing like grim death. So forgive me if you've heard this one before, but the analogy I like is, suppose that most kids were educated not in government schools as they are today, but suppose they were educated in schools funded by Walmart. Now, what would happen? They'd be in the Walmart classroom, and they would hear all day long about how wonderful Walmart is, where would you kids be without Walmart, and up on the wall, they would have all the portraits of the Walmart CEOs from over the years, and they would be taught to dance a little jig and sing a song about the greatness of the Walmart CEOs, we're unworthy to stand in their presence and all that. And then every year, they'd get one day off from school where they could celebrate the greatness of the Walmart CEOs. Now, I guarantee you, if that were the case, people would say, that is screwed up, right? Walmart is just doing this to make the kids think that all good things flow from Walmart. However, when the government runs the schools, and instead of the CEOs, we've got the U.S. presidents looking down benignly from the wall, and we get President's Day off, so you can go think about how wonderful Millard Fillmore and Chester A. Arthur were. Nobody bats an eye. Like, that's weird, right? That's weird. Of course they're going to teach it to you this way. So when the libertarians come along and say, no, they weren't just slightly off. Like, they're teaching you propaganda. They're hoping that you will fasten the shackles to your own ankles. Well, not a lot of people are ready to hear that. But that's what we're going to tell them. Now, it doesn't mean, by the way, I'll get to this later, but that doesn't mean we have to go around and at every opportunity we have to get a bullhorn and shout the whole libertarian platform at a person at every particular opportunity. Nobody does that. No party does that. Well, I suppose other parties don't even read their platforms, but it doesn't make sense to do that. I'm not saying we have to do that. But I am saying we can't betray who we are. Now, I do think sometimes about, in a situation like this, about Ron Paul, who, of course, was the 1988 Libertarian nominee. Because a lot of times people will say, well, how many bills did he get passed? Ha, 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 ha. That shows you he didn't do anything. He didn't amount to anything. All right, well, that's true. I suppose Rick Santorum probably got more bills passed. I don't know what they were about. I'm pretty sure they didn't affect me one way or the other. And I'm pretty sure if I look over the legislative history of Newt Gingrich, like, it's probably stupid or evil or counterproductive or insubstantial or whatever, probably all those things. And that's how they're going to measure success? How many bills did you get passed? How many bills can you get passed in this current environment? That shouldn't be a feather in your cap. My question would be, how many kids are reading F.A. Hayek and Ludwig von Mises because Rick Santorum inspired them to do so? I mean, I'm going to take a wild guess that Rick Santorum hasn't read a whole lot of Mises. It's just a... But yet, Ron Paul, this guy who, by his own admission, he'll say, look, I'm not the most articulate guy. I'm not the best debater in the world. I'm just a regular guy who believes in this message. This guy, who's now 78, tells people, you know, kids, there's a 900-page economic treatise I think it'd be a good idea for you to read. They say, done. Okay. You want me to read that? I'll do it. You know, at the Mises Institute, not too long ago, maybe a couple years ago, we were trying to clear out some old editions of Human Action because we were bringing out a really, really beautiful, handsome new one. So we were selling the old one for like $15, and that's like 2 cents for most. I mean, $15 for Human Action is a great deal. So we advertised this online. Hey, you know, get your copy of Human Action, $15. Now, Mises.org is a heavily trafficked site. It's super powerful, but it could not withstand the stampede to get a $15 Human Action. It actually brought the website down. And it's mostly 18 to 25ers going to do this. And it's amazing. And it's because of this guy. And it's not because Newt Gingrich or whatever, Fred Thompson or any of these people told them to do it. It's this guy. Now, I call that success. Because when you think, I mean, think about, can you even remember all the Republican nominees Republican candidates for the nomination in 2008? Can you remember these people? Duncan Hunter, anybody remember that guy? Right? Well, maybe you remember Tommy Thompson because you're not too far from Wisconsin, but Tommy Thompson was like the worst candidate I've ever seen. He was on the stage and they asked him, can you name us like 3 programs you'd abolish, or like, how about 1? And he came up with, like, he said, well, I don't know, I think with the Centers for Disease Control, the stockpile could be handled a little bit better. Nobody even knows what that is, right? And so even on Fox, the Fox News guy said, Congressman Paul, can you do any better than that? Like, it was embarrassing. That was the best they could come up with. So it was like one, or Tim Pawlenty. Like, where do they find these people? Tim Pawlenty? The most boring guy this side of Bob Dole. And he's being touted by, I mean, Hannity was actually saying the night of the first debate with Tim Pawlenty, this past cycle, he said, well, tonight all eyes are on Tim Pawlenty. And I thought, speak for yourself. What are you talking about? Who? Yeah, you and your crazy establishment automaton David Gergen might be looking at. But my point is that look at all these other people. These people are going to wind up as Jeopardy questions. Or Jeopardy answers. And the contestants won't even know the question. Right? How could that possibly be success? And parenthetically, by the way, I think one of the most illustrative moments in the recent political history of this country that emphasizes the need for an alternative was it was the last of the GOP debates, end of January 2008. They're down to 4 people. It's Ron Paul, Mike Huckabee, John McCain, and Mitt Romney. And they're sitting around a table. And if you remember this thing, 90% of that debate was McCain and Romney arguing about who was going to withdraw how many troops from Afghanistan when. It was, now, John, I'm pretty sure you said that you were planning in 10 years to draw down by 1,000 troops, but I think that's unwise. I think we've got to wait 11 years and draw down by 250. And McCain would say, now, Mitt, I can't believe you would say that. But I clearly said that 9 years from now. I mean, all totally stupid, begging the question, inane, insubstantial, makes no difference whatsoever. And finally, Ron Paul speaks up and says, I can't, what am I, in the Twilight Zone here? I mean, this is the, what about the policy itself? What about just getting out of there? Like, why are we arguing about who's going to do what when? Like, this is totally insubstantial. And then after the debate was over, they get that David Gergen on. And by the way, you know David Gergen, this commentator, he's on TV all the time, has no redeeming qualities whatsoever as a broadcaster, right? The most boring guy you've ever seen on TV, right? He has no emotions. Right? It's like if you open his head, you would expect to see wiring and circuitry in there, right? This is not a human being. There's something wrong with him. Like your friends never say, hey, David Gergen's in town to do a book signing. I'm going to drop everything and go see him. Like, no one would say that about this guy. So they asked David Gergen, David, what did you think was the highlight of tonight's debate? Well, I think it was when Mitt Romney challenged John McCain over how many troops he... That's David Gergen. That's the whole political establishment for you. Of course, the correct answer was, well, when Ron Paul finally got a chance to speak, when he finally said, could we please talk about something substantial? No, we're going to pretend that didn't even occur. So thank heavens that we have some, at least the beginnings of some type of alternative here. But in being an alternative, we have to be careful of certain temptations. Because, of course, one temptation is to think, well, I'll get elected if I don't sound so out there. Well, you don't have to sound out there. If you're a good debater, you can sound like common sense, see? Right here, common sense and reason. In a lot of ways, that's really all we're talking about here. And all we're talking about is saying, think of all the things you were taught as a child, that your parents taught you. Keep your hands to yourself. Don't steal anything, like basic moral principles. That's all we're asking. We're just asking that everybody observe this. Even if you have a fancy title in front of your name and you work in a fancy Washington office building, you still have to obey these simple commands that you learned when you were a kid. That's all we're saying. Like, it's not like something from Mars, or you have to understand quantum physics to follow what we're saying. It's not really so hard. But when people see what it means to apply these principles across the board, well, that can be a challenge. But if you're going to position yourself as being 30% different from the GOP, why would anybody vote for you? I'll just vote for the Republican, right, who has a much better chance of winning than you do. So why would I bother? So the irony is that the more you try to make yourself appealing, the less appealing you are, because you've now compromised your niche. And it's not difficult to differentiate yourself from the two major parties that we have now, because they give us the same darn thing. You know, I mean, basically, the Libertarian Party is the second party. The Republicrats are the first party. Now, this is obvious. For example, like on the civil liberties question, wasn't it funny to see Barbara Boxer and Nancy Pelosi, the great progressives, saying it's treasonous to expose the spying that we're doing? Like, what kind of fascist dystopia did that come out of? And this is the so-called progressive party of the two. And of course, you don't even need to read the paper to find out where Lindsey Graham and John McCain stand on surveillance. I mean, if it were up to John McCain, think of the invasive procedures the TSA would be engaged in, right? In fact, I don't even want you to, right? We just had dinner. But imagine that, right? There's no point at which John McCain would say, now that's just too cotton-picking much. There just isn't. So on that key issue, yeah, okay, you get outliers on the right, outliers on the left, but in terms of the leadership and the mainstream people, they are in lockstep with each other, absolutely. Or on foreign policy, good grief. Oh, yeah, we get a big difference. Big old peaceful Democrats. Gosh, although I have to say, this Syria fiasco was very refreshing to watch. Like, he is dying to invade, and now, like, what is he going to do? Whereas I kind of feel like the neocons of the right probably still would have bombed anyway. Like, I still think that there is like a 1% difference on that. They would have bombed anyway. Like, I don't care. You know what the rationale is? I don't even know. We're just bombing, right? Bomb. Yeah, that's right. That's right. We're gonna free you so much you'll be able to taste it. But on the foreign policy thing, I mean, good grief, right? Like when Obama talked about foreign policy, he even said we can't be isolationists. Isolationists meaning, you know, we've got to continue to have troops in 130 countries or whatever. Because if you had them only in 120, then that would be like going back to the 1930s or something. And it really does make you wonder. A friend of mine posed this question recently. According to the Republicrats, does that mean that every other country in the world is isolationist and therefore morally reprehensible? I'm just wondering. And I suppose their answer would be yes, right? Because our country is the awesomest of the awesome. We're full of awesome people. And the only reason anybody might be unhappy with our government is just because we're so darn awesome. Like, that's the mentality that basically exists everywhere. Or in 2008, when we had the financial problems and the bailouts, how about that? McCain and Obama, both. McCain's got to suspend his campaign and rush back to Washington to help. He's going to help us out, John McCain. John McCain, the guy who, okay, it was said that he doesn't know a whole lot about economics, and he does not. Now, I mean, he's not the brightest bulb, and I think he actually graduated like at the bottom 1% of his class. It was some horrifying statistic. But when it came to economics, he actually said, to give himself credibility, that, well, you know, okay, I admit I haven't studied a lot of it, but heaven help us. He said, I have Alan Greenspan's book. There's his credential. That's McCain. But McCain said, well, he said, don't worry. I mean, McCain was proposing to spend trillions of dollars buying bad mortgages. Then he stepped back because he realized that that was insane even by his standards. But he was going to do that. He favored all these bailouts. Obama favored the bailouts. The progressive Obama favors the bailouts, right? So they're all over and over. The AIG bailout was the most preposterous of, well, I don't know. Hard to say which is the most preposterous of them. But on this, I highly recommend that David Stockman book, The Great Deformation. And you're going to say to me, Woods, that book is like 700 pages long. And I'm going to say, you're not even going to notice the pages going by. Because not only are you going to learn so much, but he has such an engaging prose style. And he so despises the bad guys that it's like rhetorically, every page you turn, it's like a fist is coming like right up through the page. And you think to yourself, well, I don't know, I can still see one or two arguments left over. No, you think he's overlooked, and then you turn the page, and he's ready with a baseball bat, and he's going bang, 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 and they're all gone. It's an incredible book, and in there, he points out that, you know what they didn't bother to ask when they were getting ready to bail out AIG? They didn't bother to ask, well, which firms are exposed to AIG's credit default swap obligations? And it turns out that it was not Main Street or whatever the argument was. It was about a dozen or so institutions, huge institutions all over the place. And these institutions were capitalized to the tune of $20 trillion, and the AIG losses they would have suffered were $60 billion, which is about 3 months' worth of executive bonuses. That's why we got the bailouts. We can't compromise on these bonuses. That was it. Well, there's your progressive policy. There's your progressive. And now, remember at the time, they didn't even have time to talk about this to us, right? Citizen, we don't have time to discuss this. We're too busy saving the economy to talk to you about. Well, yeah, if I were pulling something like this, I wouldn't want to talk about it either. And that was the mainstream. The McCains and the Obamas sitting in a tree, K-I-S-S-I-N-G, as usual. Maybe I'm dating myself. I don't know if the kids still say that one anymore. I don't know.
I'm stealing that one.
Yeah, there you go. That's a fresh new one for Lee Wrights. All right, now look. After all this, can you believe there are people who say, don't vote for the Libertarians, you're throwing your vote away? If you want to throw your vote away, vote for McCain or Obama, right? Vote for the Republican, vote for this. You're going to get this no matter which one comes into power. You're going to get the war, you're going to get the bailouts, you're going to get the spying, you're going to get all of it. That's throwing your vote away. I would emphasize, if I were running as a Libertarian, I would emphasize constantly the commonalities of the competing candidates, how similar they are. I'd have their faces morphing into each other. The technology that's available to us, by the way, graphically today, allows us to get away with all kinds of fun. I would depict them together in my ads. Hey, there they are. I'd have their little heads bouncing together, smiling at each other. Okay, maybe I'd even have them in a tree smooching, right? I mean, and I would say, look, if the Democrat wants to bulldoze your neighborhood, the Republican will promise to do it 10% cheaper. Is that what you want? So I came up with this ad idea, all right? And I've written the first half. You guys write the second half for yourselves, okay? Here's my ad. And this is an ad where I'm basically trying to appeal to young people. Now, young people just generally don't vote. I don't know why that is, but it's a fact. It's hard to get them to vote. Maybe we can change that. I don't know. If we can make it seem cool, Libertarians seem cool, I don't know. And I do know that the oldest cohort, they vote like crazy. Like, it does not matter if it's the last thing they do, they're going to go in that polling place and vote. So I'm basically conceding that voting block in this ad. So the ad idea runs this way. When your parents, or maybe I'll say grandparents, were growing up, and then we'll show all these different things that they did when they were growing up. People used to read something called newspapers to keep up with the issues of the day. If you needed to look something up, you drove halfway across town to consult a 40-year-old encyclopedia. What is that? Walter Cronkite told Americans what to think. There were 3 TV channels and 2 political parties. And so I roll that all up as the same old-fashioned, what do you want to be like your parents and drive their Buick? Or drive their Oldsmobile? Or do you want to be us? Like, so the second half, I leave to you guys. But I like this. In the old days, we had all this backward, silly stuff. Like today, I'm embarrassed. Like I have a child who's growing up, can't imagine life without Google. Like I'm embarrassed to tell her how I used to look up dates. You know, like I would just have to say, well, I guess I'll have to, 3 weeks from now when I'm passing by the library, I'll go look it up. I mean, horrifying. But it's not those days anymore. Now, as I indicated earlier, I understand the sentiment that says we need to water down the platform to broaden our appeal. But again, I would urge caution with this because I think that in doing so, you're actually narrowing your appeal. Moreover, I think we need to be as clear about who we are as possible. And for that reason, and this might be a little controversial, but I have never liked this slogan that libertarians, we're fiscally conservative and socially liberal. The Texas LP just got rid of that as its slogan, and wonderful, great, not a moment too soon. Because that gives the impression that libertarians don't really have a philosophy. We're just a little from column A and a little from column B. But to the contrary, we're the party with principles, right? It's not that we have a little bit of their philosophy. It's that it makes us sound we're totally inconsistent. We're sort of left and we're sort of right. No, we are the most consistent political philosophy in the history of the world. We have a single principle, non-aggression. And once you understand that, you understand the libertarian position on everything. So what we believe in is freedom and treating you like an adult. That's it. That's the way to talk to people about it. You want to know where we stand? Just imagine your life without hangmen and executioners threatening you all day long, and you'll know what life would be like with the libertarians. Also, in national races, I see no reason to run away from foreign policy, because that obviously taps into a huge reservoir of discontent that obviously Ron Paul managed to exploit very, very effectively. And I would certainly avoid, if I'm talking foreign policy as a libertarian candidate, I would never use a phrase like U.S. interests. That's regime speak, U.S. interest. What is that? Corporate interests? What is that? The interests of the ruling class? What does that even mean? We don't talk that way. Let the Republican talk that way. Let the Republican talk about U.S. interests. You talk about the justice of the situation and the fact that people are being fleeced and looted in order to torture people they've never even met and exploiting their patriotism like that. That, gee, you know what? The same people that you conservatives are saying, I don't trust you to educate my kid, or I'm afraid you're going to take my guns away. However, as soon as you tell me about Syria, I will drop all my critical faculties and immediately accept everything you're saying. That's just not consistent. It's the same people, okay? The same people who are promoting milk subsidies that you hate so much. I wish they could get as excited about war as they do about milk subsidies, ridiculous things like that. These are the same people lying to you about foreign. They lie about everything. They can't help themselves. They would look right at you and tell you have 3 eyes. Now, they stand to gain nothing from that lie. They just can't help themselves. Now, again, I don't mean to say that you have to go around to every single potential voter and say, hello, Mr. Potential Voter, let me tell you all our positions on every single thing. No. You think of, what is my entry point with this person, right? Or this group. How do I get them? I mean, this is how we would, even if we had nothing to do with elections, we're just talking to our friends and neighbors. Just think about, well, what are the interests of my friends and neighbors? And where's there possible commonality with my libertarian philosophy? And so one of the ways I've actually done something kind of like this. I haven't written a book in a little while. I'm kind of tired of it. It's really exhausting. Too busy doing homeschool videos for Ron Paul to have time for books. But this book that I did called Rollback a couple years ago, I think I have a few copies out there. But in Rollback, this was pitched toward the Tea Party. I didn't intend it to be. My publisher, to my horror, made it look like a book against Obama. Oh my gosh, this is a book like against everything you can imagine. The book may as well be called Everything Should Be Abolished. And they're pitching it as an anti-Obama book to try to get it to the Tea Party people. But the way it's organized, it's like peeling the layers of an onion. So it starts off with, okay, Obama's been kind of bad. So we talk about the stimulus and Obamacare and whatever. And the next chapter is, and you know what? The government really made the situation with the financial crisis worse, and it may actually have helped to cause it with the Federal Reserve. Yeah, okay. And then we say, and by the way, speaking of the Federal Reserve, that stinks too. And in the next chapter, and by the way, the military-industrial complex is also a scam, and let me show you all the details about that. And then the last chapter is, and if I left anything out, like, I don't know, government funding of science, like really hard ones to argue, let's cover those. So I get them in with, yeah, okay, he's right, that Obama, he sure is a troublemaker, you know, but then I've got him, all right? And then I just make it seem like one thing is just naturally following from the other, right? I'm just taking things where they lead me, that's all. So I enjoyed that. That was mischievous to actually have that happen. Now, it doesn't mean also that we have to be against all reductions in government power or all reductions in taxes if they're not reductions to zero. Like some people accuse us of that. Hey, we want to reduce taxes from 28% to 10%, and you libertarians are against that. No, we're not. Of course, I would love to have the taxes go down to 10% tomorrow. But as a libertarian, I myself am going to say, well, look, I want as low as can possibly be imagined, but I'll be happily willing to work with anybody who's going in the right direction. I think that should be our attitude. But today we have a absolutely tremendous opportunity, the likes of which we've never had before. I mean, think about in the old days. Think about when the Libertarian Party was founded. If you wanted to find out more about the Libertarian Party, well, send a self-addressed stamped envelope to our post office box, and then we'll... Yeah, whereas today you've got all these opportunities, and also, especially with YouTube, and ever since the Ron Paul campaigns, I've seen that there are people in the liberty movement who have talents that I couldn't cultivate if I had 10 lifetimes, especially like video production. Some of the ads that these people know how to make are just devastating, and we got to exploit this, right? I mean, these people whom we're running against are so... they're at once laughable and disgusting, like all together. This should be easy, right? Like, this should be a breeze to make them look ridiculous, and we can do it on the cheap with the videos and the free resources that we have that we can use to spread our ideas. We got to do that. Now, also, the younger generation. Again, it's hard to appeal to them because they don't vote for whatever reason. We got to change that, and I don't know how to do it. But they are not so tied into the Democrats and the Republicans as their parents were. They're certainly not tied into the Republicans. The Democrats, they're tied into by default because they say basically to themselves, I just can't belong to a party that has John McCain in it. So who's left? They go to the Democrats. But a recent poll found that out of a group of 18 to 32-year-olds, 40% view libertarian favorably. And about a third of them don't even know what it is. So that's another third that we can potentially appeal to. When it's explained to them, we get 58% of them saying, yep, that's what I think. Now, we have to take this with some caution, though, because maybe they don't really know what that really... When I say non-aggression, I mean the government can't do any of the things you like either. But still, this is a good start. This is a good start. And I also... I like the idea when we have this thing that we're the party of principle or the party with principles. The principle that we should be aiming at here is not, we shouldn't be echoing the GOP sort of strategy of sort of implying that the poor are looting the rich and the blacks are looting the whites. That's not the focus of libertarians. The focus is as follows. I want to read you this passage. Too many libertarians have absorbed the negative and elitist conservative worldview to the effect that our enemy today is the poor who are robbing the rich, the blacks who are robbing the whites, or the masses who are robbing heroes and businessmen. In fact, it is the state that is robbing all classes, rich and poor, black and white, worker and businessman alike. It is the state that is ripping us all off. It is the state that is the common enemy of mankind. And who is the state? It is any group who manages to seize control of the state's coercive machinery of theft and privilege. Of course, these ruling groups have differed in composition through history, but whoever they are, they can only be a small minority of the population, ruling and robbing the rest of us for their power and wealth. And since they are a small minority, the state rulers can only be kept in power by deluding us about the wisdom or necessity of their rule. Hence, it is our major task to oppose and desanctify their entrenched rule in the same spirit that the first libertarian revolutionaries opposed and desanctified their rulers 200 years ago. That's Murray Rothbard. That's exactly right. The state is the enemy, and it's easy to portray this. I mean, how many rich and powerful people are suffering during the drug war? How many poor and vulnerable people are benefiting? And just go on down the list. How many poor and vulnerable people are benefiting from the bailouts? How many of them are benefiting from the foreign policy, where they wind up in the military because the government has foreclosed all other opportunities because they've made it illegal to hire any of them. So they wind up in the military, then they come home maimed and emotionally disfigured. And look at how much we've helped you. That's got to be made clear. It's not other parts of the population against us. It's the state against everybody. Now, this is, as you well know in this room, this is a slow and laborious task. And it is a task that forces us to ask ourselves, where do we derive satisfaction? Do we derive it only from immediate victory in the short-term sense, or do we derive satisfaction from knowing that we are spreading what is a truly liberating philosophy that is responsible for what vestiges of prosperity and civilization we have in the world? It's true that I do believe that it's very likely that there is some type of fiscal collapse coming in the future. There's no way that all the entitlement programs can be maintained. And so there will be a vacuum ideologically, because people who have been pushing these programs and promising everybody that everything will be fine, people who have been in power for the past century are going to have a lot to answer for. They can pretend that it's our fault, but come on, how close has anybody in this room been to power? But if you get discouraged, imagine what it must have been like in the 1840s to belong to the Liberty Party, the abolitionist political party that at its height got 2.3% of the popular vote. Imagine what that must have been like. You're arguing on behalf of a position that you think is so bleeding obvious, the immorality of slavery, that you can't even believe you have to debate it in the first place. And then when you do, you barely even register anywhere. And yet, some of those people actually lived to see their own vindication. Now, by no means am I promising anything like that to you, but bear in mind that we follow in a great and noble tradition of people who said, I don't care that the major parties ignore questions of justice and morality, and they think only in political terms. I don't care that the conscience of the public has not been awakened. I don't care. It is my job not to ask how many people I converted and how many elections I won, but how hard did I fight for this cause that is so supremely just and is so elegant and beautiful. That's what we commit ourselves to, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you very much. Thanks, everybody. So I guess we'll do a couple of questions. Okay, before we do the questions, I want to just make a quick announcement. I've already made this promise, so I've got to make sure to make the announcement. Some of you already know about this, but I want you to know, out at my table, I've got some flyers. And the flyers are about this project that I've been working on. And I'm doing this announcement now sort of as a teeny-weeny little fundraiser for the LP of Illinois. And basically it works like this. I finally decided that instead of griping about how bad the world is, I should do something to make it better. And because, I mean, woe is me will get you only so far. You got to do something. So I decided, well, here's what I'll do. For one thing, I think the way American history is taught is part of the problem, because people, if you're taught that in American history that big businessmen as a class are wicked, and centralized power is the source of liberation, so then no wonder we're in the position we are now. Everybody's taught the wrong history. So I decided, well, you know what, I'm just going to teach U.S. history the way I want to teach it. Almost ready? All right, why don't we pause for a minute? Okay. So I got a couple people I trust, my friend Kevin Gutzman, who's a great biographer of James Madison, and a few other people, some Austrian economists, and I started a website where we have, I don't know if you've ever heard of the Great Courses or the Teaching Company. You can buy courses and listen in your car, and those are great. But this is like the libertarian version. So like, you know, okay, this is going to be like one of us teaching the stuff. And you don't have to sit in front of your computer at 5:30. It's downloadable. You view it or listen to it. I'm just going to use my booming voice. Okay. So the idea of the site is that we have, at this point, we have 8 courses. We have 2 U.S. histories, 2 Western civs. We have Austrian economics. We have Keynesianism, what it actually teaches, just presented to you, and then the flaws. Then we have a course on logic. Now, maybe you guys don't need a course on logic, but the rest of the world certainly does. And then a course on U.S. constitutional history. And then we just keep adding courses, plus we have Q&A forums. And so it's either taught by me or by people I've delegated to and that I trust. And it's great, right? It's and like, when you go there and you look at all the stuff that's there, you're going to feel like a kid in a candy store, okay? So anyway, so here's the thing. So for tonight, I have the flyer up there. The site is called libertyclassroom.com. And I am giving away a 50% off coupon code. The coupon code is Illinois, so you guys will remember it. Illinois in all caps. Illinois, like you're shouting Illinois, right? Because you're cheering for Illinois. And then this is only good through Monday morning. And after Monday morning, if you write to me and say, hey, I didn't have time, I'll say, I think you're some kind of lunatic. I never made any such offer. I don't know what you're talking about. But for everybody who signs up with that coupon code sometime between now and Monday morning, for every new member who comes in, $10 will go to the LP of Illinois. So we'll try and bring in some hundreds of bucks to help pay for some stuff. So that's that. All right. Okay. So let's see. Let's see if we can do a couple of questions here. All right. Okay. Oh, boy, it's almost like I planted her here. She wants more information. All right. Woohoo! Right. Well, my thought with this libertyclassroom.com program is that I could have saved myself so much effort if I had known the stuff that's on this site when I was 18, instead of having to find it all out the hard way. In fact, that's why most of my books I wrote for that reason, that it took me years to figure this stuff out. Now, I just want people to spend 3 hours reading a book, and then they don't have to do it. So the idea is we've got probably 2 more. I'm going to do 2 courses on the history of political philosophy from a libertarian perspective. I'm going to try to do money and banking. I want to do a course where one of my economics professors is going to go through a mainstream economics textbook, chapter by chapter, and show in each chapter what's screwy about it. So to help kids who are in universities, who are going through these economics programs, here's what's screwy about this chapter. Here's what's wrong with that chapter. So, the sky is the limit. So libertyclassroom.com, coupon code Illinois in all caps. And then if you have questions, we have discussion forums where the faculty are all in there. Pose your question. And then once a month, we even take questions live. Like, we come right into it's kind of creepy. Our faces are right on your screen, almost like we can see you, but we can't. Only the government can see you. I can't actually see you. Okay. So there you have it.
Anybody else? No questions? I'll think of one.
All right. Here. Make it an easy one here. I'm tired.
Actually, it's not a question.
Okay.
I'm going to finish your paragraph you remember earlier about your ad.
Sure, yeah. Let's brainstorm.
I really like your idea about your ad.
You do like it?
I love it.
All right, good. Thanks.
I'd love to talk further about it because I know some young filmmakers that could make that happen.
Oh, that would be awesome.
You know what the most powerful part of that ad would be?
Okay, what?
At the very end, if it said paid for by the committee to elect Thomas Woods president. I apologize for that. That's a nice dream I have.
Oh, you guys are very generous. Thank you. That.
Is this the first time Tom Woods has been held speechless here?
Dr. Woods, I promise you, it's the most fun you'll have with your clothes on.
Well, thanks. Thank you.
I don't think this is working.
That's okay. We all have booming voices, right? We have to strain to have the voice of liberty be heard in this country, right? All right, so who's left? Anybody else want to ask anything?
I'll ask a question.
Yeah, please, yeah.
Okay, so trying to get somebody to vote third party, Libertarian, and they say, I don't want to waste. I know you did cover some.
Yeah,
of this,
right, yeah.
But I don't want to waste my vote. I mean, if we could just get a little more detail on that, because it seems to me people are so, inertia is so strong
Yeah.
in politics that it's very hard just with logic, it seems, to overcome that just emotional tie of inertia
Yeah.
over time.
Yeah. Okay, I would run down, like what I did here, all the things that the two parties have collaborated, and I'm sorry to keep saying the two major parties, that have collaborated to harm you. And the bailouts are an example, and the farm, whatever, all these sorts of things. And I would say, these people need to feel political pain. Not physical pain. I mean, I have some confidence that at some point they'll feel some kind of justice somewhere or another, but they need to feel political pain. And they're not going to feel political pain if you're just going to choose another one just like them. But then I would say, suppose it were the 1840s, and like anyone with a speck of justice and morality in his heart, you wanted to abolish slavery. And somebody said, well, you know what? We have a political party devoted to exactly that. Are you telling me that you would have been such a follower in those days that you would have said, well, I don't want to throw my vote away. Like, sure, I'm against slavery and everything, but come on, I don't want to throw my vote away. That wouldn't be respectable, right? I wouldn't look good among my friends. My friends are Whigs, It's cool to be a Whig. It's not cool to be I would say that. I mean, really? Really? But, I mean, it ultimately comes down to, well, either you want to be a leader or you want to be a follower, right? The easiest thing in the world is to keep repeating the same old thing we've been doing a million times. But what confidence do you have that by repeating exactly what we've been doing, things will ever be any different? And then I would say finally that, look, ultimately no election is going to boil down to your one vote, right? No election ever, certainly at a large scale level, is ever going to boil down to your one vote. So when you get in that ballot box, when you're casting your ballot, when you're in that voting booth, you have to ask yourself, what does my conscience tell me to do? Forget anything else, because your one vote is not going to decide that Obama's president or he's not president. But you have to say, who is talking about justice and who is a careerist? Well, they're all careerists. They're all so superficial that the two-dimensional television screen is deep enough to plumb the depths of their character. Maybe I would say, look, how about this? Just one time, just as a friend, just for me, one time, try it. And if you feel dirty afterward, then next year vote for a Democrat and I won't say anything. But once, just try it. Just buck the system and say, you know what? We have been looted and fleeced and lied to and exploited by these people. I'm going to try something different with my one vote. And I have a funny feeling you're going to feel like it's one of the best things you ever did. I think I'd put it that way. Okay.
Now, my frustration with bringing people over to the Libertarian Party is the ones that are already with us, but they're not with us. And I'm referring to the Ron Paul supporters who, my impression was that Tampa would have opened their eyes, but it hasn't. How do we, what do we do with those people?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, I mean, let me be honest with you. Well, some people have.
There's some of us, but not that there's too many that are still over there.
Some people have. Now, maybe what I'm going to say here is slightly heretical, but I tend to be somewhat ecumenical in some things, on non-essentials. So if there are people who say, I just am not interested in politics, then Okay, well then you do your thing. Like there's a division of labor. Everybody's got something to do. That's okay. If I know somebody who is running in a race and he says, "Well, I'm going to run as a Republican," I don't shout him down or tell him that this is, you can't possibly do this. Some people have gotten elected on the local level and done a few decent things, and that's their decision. I haven't necessarily decided that the Libertarian Party is the only conceivable way to go. But it does seem like when you look at all the, I mean, my gosh, I'm sure somebody has done it, but I haven't seen it. Somebody's got to compile, it probably has been done, all the different last-minute rule changes or breaking of the rules or whatever that occurred in that last cycle with Ron Paul. Like, that's just got to be, because that alone would seem to be a strong Exhibit A for this. But maybe it's going to take one or two more cycles. I mean, maybe people feel like, well, we've got a few semi-decent Republicans, so maybe that's the way to start. Maybe it takes a couple more. Maybe it will take another Romney-ish nomination, maybe two more Romney-ish nominations before. I mean, I don't know, but I think it's. I think I'm not sure that's something I think people just they just have to see it. Like either you see it or you don't, because I think a lot of people just have a lot emotionally invested in a particular strategy, and something's got to snap for them. And it might not necessarily be our arguments that we make. Maybe they just have to learn the hard way.
Thank you.
Yeah, so, hello? Yeah. Okay, good. I'm one of those who I was doing the Ron Paul thing, and then after the GNC, I said, that's it, I can't do that anymore, and I reported into my nearest chapter, Libertarian chapter, so anyway. But one of the things, like on the Gary Johnson thing, when I was trying to get people to vote for Gary Johnson, when I found out about the whole ballot access scene, to me, it's like if everyone knew about how they are suppressing any third party through the ballot access creepy laws or whatever,
I know.
then that's another way to outrage them and maybe get them aboard.
That's an excellent point.
What's your thought?
Yeah, I mean, and basically everything at this point needs to be made into a 2-minute YouTube, because people just don't read anymore. I tell you this as an author who reads his royalty statements, okay? They don't read. Make snappy videos that outrage them with an action item at the end. Don't just outrage them for no reason. Give them an action item at the end. Yeah, I agree.
What's an action item?
I don't know. I don't.
Oh, you mean what to do?
Go for. Yeah, right. Go help one of these organizations like the LP that's struggling against this, but also pass this video around so people get talking about it. Okay.
I don't want to beat a dead horse or anything, but what she said made a whole lot of sense, and that's kind of what I was coming up here to say. You made a lot of really great points about reasons to vote Libertarian and why you don't vote for the Republicrats. But one thing that I think that resonates with the general public is speaking about, again, the 5% or the 2% if you're in Texas or whatever that may be. And it gives people in their mind, it eliminates the wasted vote syndrome because it becomes an achievable goal.
Yeah,
5% all of a sudden is an achievable goal.
Right.
Whereas winning, although that is what we want to do, people don't see that as possible. But when you give them something like a 5%, then people decide, or they think, oh my God, I can really help the liberty movement. If I get them 5%, that we can elect libertarians all over the place. And I think, that's might be the way to go.
If you're thinking about what am I going to do with my one vote, well, I can either vote for Romney or Obama, or I can cast a vote that might, ultimately have real significance for the political history of the country, right? The political future of the whole country. I mean, it seems to me now that really gives new meaning to throwing your vote away. Talk about a wasted vote, to vote for Obama when you could do this. Yeah, that's another arrow in your quiver, I think.
Thank you.
Okay.
I've tried that in the past, and it does, at least with young people, that argument works. One of the problems that I've been finding lately because of the surveillance state and all of these sorts of things is that there's so much fear that actually voting for something new becomes very scary. And things like that outrage us, like the NSA, spying, the IRS scandal, probably even drones and all this sort of stuff that we think of as terrifying and scary from a surveillance state point of view. In the words of my mother-in-law, she says things like, "That's what they need to do," quote, "to keep us safe." And this is an argument that I can see a lot of people making in this day and age. Of the fear is just making it so we'll
Right.
put up with anything
Right.
in order to be safe.
Right.
And that's, I think, a very tough thing to argue right now.
It is, but and there are going to be people who may be to some degree unreachable by us. But on the other hand, the people who are deeply concerned about these issues have nowhere to go, really. I mean, you get an occasional outlying candidate who talks about it, but even then, like even this challenger to Mitch McConnell, like in general, I just want to see Mitch McConnell get voted out. I don't care who replaces him. I just think he deserves it, and it would be just fun to watch. But this Matt Bevin, who's running against him, who's a perfectly honorable, decent person, but when he was interviewed on the Robert Wenzel show, he wouldn't commit to whether Snowden was a hero or a traitor. Like, whoa. So there are going to be some people who are not reachable, but of those who are concerned, because the other two parties are focusing on the safety issue and security, we're just doing this for your own good, I think it gives us an opening for at least a segment of the population, which is going to feel increasingly politically homeless as the other candidates just either don't talk about it or just take an outright horrifying position on it. So that's at least something.
Hi. Is this on? It is
Oh,
on?
yeah, no, apparently
on?
it is coming out. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I just had probably one of the most profoundly meaningful experiences in my life was singing my Ron Paul song, which I'd written for a bunch of wildly enthusiastic 20-somethings at Chicago's Wise Pool pub a couple of years ago. And all the young women were hugging me and everything. It was a very nice experience.
Well, that's nothing new, right?
So, but anyway, I think what we're dealing with there is a profound sense of demoralization at this point. And perhaps an argument that could be made would be there's no party establishment here who will crush you if you get involved, as was the case with the Republicans.
Yeah, I assume that's true.
And the other thing, I wonder how much we can learn from the success of Nigel Farage in the United Kingdom, forming a brand new political party out of nowhere.
Yeah.
That's now a major player, so it can be done. So I don't know, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I know who he is, and I've followed some of his speeches, but I don't know the details of his movement. But I'm happy to take encouraging examples from anywhere we can find them. Sure.
Dr. Woods, I love your work.
Thanks.
I really do. And I'm so glad.
Thank you, guys.
So glad that you're taking it to the next level, which is putting it all on tape and on film and taking it onto the internet and helping the next generation to learn it. And I'd like to just get a little bit more of your thoughts on the whole concept of the Libertarian Party pegging their next marketing campaign, perhaps finishing that ad that you started with, now isn't it time to join the Libertarian Party and get involved in real education reform? And going along the lines of not just school choice, which I think is good, but really talking about the homeschooling effort and what can be done. Because you've got programs, other people have got programs out there. It's ripe for the taking. With Ron Paul's program, I'm just delighted to promote that. Don't you think we could do a lot better in differentiating the Libertarian Party as the real party of education?
Well, I think so. I mean, on the other hand, there are some. I would think that some of the Christian right Republicans would probably position themselves as being pretty good because they probably favor homeschooling and so on. So we'd have to carve out a niche there. But also, I think misconception to think that everybody who's homeschooling is an evangelical Christian. That is increasingly not the case. I mean, obviously that's a big part of it, but a lot of people are doing it. I mean, and they're doing it for a lot of different reasons. So yeah, it would be great to get out there and identify ourselves with that, especially because that is an almost unbelievable example of a social movement that just sort of occurred. Right? And certainly there was nothing in our culture or in the media or anything that would want to encourage something like this. They would be horrified by that. Now, and it's funny, my own wife was homeschooled back when nobody knew what that was, and they would say, is that even legal? Like, are your parents in jail? Like, what is this? You have one tooth? Like, what is this? So, so I've seen it firsthand, basically, and it's extremely exciting. I mean, it's a case of, it's something that government wants to crack down on, but it's gotten to be so big that there's really no way they can do it. I mean, that's amazing. I mean, it's exactly what we fantasize about when we imagine what the libertarian world will look like. It'll be, everybody will have his own sort of thing that he'll feel comfortable. Everybody will have an education and teaching what he believes and all that sort of thing. And it'll be spontaneous and it'll just grow on its own. And yet here it actually is. Like, I mean, hey, wow, I'm not just preaching stuff off the top of my head that I just thought of. It actually occurs. So sure, I mean, anything we can do to build that up and encourage it. And of course, I would like to see, I think the homeschooling families should get some tax money back, right? I mean, like, what? I don't see the justice in this. I mean, everybody should get their tax money back, but for heaven's sake, like, I mean, I have to fly all over the country to pay my property taxes, basically, even though I would never in a million years send my kids to their crummy schools. Never in a million years would I do that.
Well, I think it's just the opposite. I think that the Libertarian Party should be talking about how unjust it is that people are taxed through their property taxes for education, which is, as you had indicated quite earlier, working at cross purposes, teaching their kids that government's there to help.
That's true. Now, the thing is that, yeah, you got to bear in mind that you are going after the sacredest of sacred cows here. So it's got to be done. It can't be done in a ham-handed way. It's got to be done. I would recommend this tack only to the most skilled and tactful libertarian debaters we have, because most people honestly think, even my own father, who taught me basically the principles that I have now, his view was that the only thing government owes you is protection and an education for your kids. Even my father thought that. And my father was a great, great guy. So that is a hard one to pry them away, especially because they associate education with local patriotism, the local football team, whatever, the prom. And they just can't imagine their lives apart from this thing, even though you could still have that if you wanted it. Just pay for it yourself, right?
Okay, Tom, I've been dealing with a few progressives, and I'm wondering what the word seniorage means. Have you used that?
Oh, seniorage is like the... I don't exactly understand how it's used in the production of fiat money, but seniorage would be the money, like when the profit that the government makes in when it's
minting the coins and so forth.
Right, but when they like, I even asked Bob Murphy this. What does seniorage mean? You might ask Steve Horwitz tomorrow, actually. What does seniorage?
It's like
SEIGNURAGE, something like that.
Yeah,
and I think I said to Bob, what does seniorage mean with regard to fiat money? I don't see how the government earns anything off this and whatever. And he actually had to look it up and ask people, and so I think you better wait.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a Horwitz question.
Now we'll give you a couple minutes to plug your Liberty Classroom.
No, I feel like I've already done. I've already tried your patience with my. But I will plug my other project though, as long as you've given me permission. I just need people to know what I'm working on, because I'm just killing myself. I mean, really, we love you. We don't care. That's very sweet of you. Thanks. But so Ron Paul says, I want to start. He's been wanting to start a homeschool program since 2008, and nobody did anything about it. And then he retired and said, no, I really do want to do this. So he got me on board and said, I want you to do these history courses and government. I'm doing a government course. Wait till you see that one. Yeah, it'd be the anti-government course. But so anyway, so the way each course works, so the homeschool curriculum is K through 12. The grades are being done. We've got grades 6, 7, 9, and 10 finished. More to come very quickly. Grades K through 5 will be free. You don't pay 1 cent for any of the materials. It's all free. And then after that, it's not really that much. It's very price competitive. But each course is 5 lessons a week, 36 weeks. That's 180 video lessons. 180 videos per course. I'm doing 4 courses. So you calculate that, and you get, yeah, so people will write to me and say, Tom, I know you're busy. I just have 7 questions. I mean, I just can't, right? I mean, I've got so many videos to do. So the idea is that Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, each day there's a 20 to 25-minute video on some topic in the course. Then Friday's a review, because review is how you learn. You hear it again. I mean, and so what I do is I do my video. Then the next day, the first 5 minutes is a review of that. And then on Friday, it's a review of the whole week so that it is hammered. If you just read a book on ancient China, you won't remember any of it after you put it down. But if you read it a second time, well, a few things will stay in your head. So we're doing that because that's going to help them to remember. But if you were to go to, I have a page where I list all the topics in Western Civ 1 that I'm covering. And I mean, it's all the political thinkers that you've heard of, and it's economics, it's history, it's all this stuff from the ancient world to 1492. If you were to go to tomwoods.com/westernciv, you will see the 180 topics. And I'll tell you, it is very rewarding. I feel like I'm doing something. Well, this is one of the few times I've really said to myself, I'm doing something for the ages. And it's really thrilling. But when I say thrilling, I mean exhausting to the point of damaging my health. Because 180 videos per course. Now he's given me a lot of time to work on it, but all the same, it's hanging over my head like the sword of Damocles here. So I hope people will at least check it out. I mean, I have a shortcut to an article on there that explains it. So I think it's easiest to go to ronpaulhomeschool.com. But I'm going to be doing Western Civ 1, Western Civ 2, half a government course, and I'm going to be doing the 2 other courses I'll be doing. Number 1 is American Constitutionalism. We're going to go from the colonial charters and covenants and early constitutions, and we'll do all that, and analyze where the American constitutional tradition is coming from. And we'll do the Articles of Confederation and all the debates over that, and we'll do all kinds of things. So I'm going to cover jury nullification, like things that wouldn't be covered in your normal Constitution course, all the way through, all the controversy with Jefferson and Hamilton and Andrew Jackson and the Civil War, and then the progressives and the amendments of the Constitution, and then current events, all the way up through Obamacare, presidential war powers, and then at the end, Lysander Spooner. What does he think about the Constitution? But then my last thing, this is if I'm still alive after the other ones. The last one is going to be a history of the major American wars. And it's not going to be a military history. For each war, it's going to be how we got into it, how we paid for it, and what were the long-term consequences for America because of that war. Now, I think if somebody goes through a program like that, and we get a lot of people going through a program like that, we're going to be in a better position than we are today. Okay, one more.
I was just curious. I don't really have a lot of problems debating the neocons and the progressive people. That's kind of almost an easy win.
Okay.
My problem is now anarcho-capitalists getting in the way of trying to, the guilt of statism.
Yeah, because you're involved in libertarian politics.
Right, so they kind of like pull the rug out from underneath you at the last minute, and I was just curious if you had any advice.
Well, the thing is that there's no reason they have to do this. Like Murray Rothbard was like the originator of anarcho-capitalism, and yet he was fascinated with politics. And at first he was skeptical of the Libertarian Party, but then he became more sympathetic. Then he became alienated from it. But in principle, he didn't say, he never said, in fact, both he and Lysander Spooner countered the argument that it's immoral to vote. So, I mean, and by the way, that doesn't mean that that's the correct position, but it means that it's not obviously the wrong position either. So it doesn't have to be the case, but now I'm not out in the trenches the way you guys are in terms of politics, so I don't know how big an issue this is. It really is. Are there really that many libertarians who are anti?
Rothbard voted himself, so that's a neat point.
That's right, but that's not. They say, well, okay, Rothbard deviated there, you know. So, yeah, Ken, is that a big thing?
Amongst the Facebook Kinsella's, I think Molyneux also.
Yeah, no, that's true.
So they're there. I think even Anthony Gregory, isn't he anti-voting?
Yeah, he might be. I mean, yeah, I mean, some of them will concede. Like Molyneux conceded to me that, you know, that if there's some educational merit that comes out of a campaign, he's not against that. But yeah, no, I don't know. I mean, I mean, use whatever is available to you to fight. If you want to use politics, use that. And if somebody doesn't want to use politics, I mean, you know, the libertarians, 99% of the time, it's live and let live. You know, well, you've got your path and I've got mine. But on this, it's what? What's wrong with you? You sell out. I mean, yeah, let's try. You know, there are so few of us in this world. You know, can't we treat each other with decency here?
All right, let's
Okay. All right. Thanks.